Okay.
Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to a beautiful Saturday. At least I think it was. I'm actually in the car. I am not driving, but when I left this morning, it was pretty. So I think it's going to be a nice day in Nashville. I hope the weekend is good for everybody. Our guest today is Councilmember John Rutherford. We are really glad that Councilmember Rutherford is on. He is one of the council members who has particularly been paying close attention to these Zoom calls, so he knows how they typically work. Councilmember Rutherford, good morning. How are you?
Hey, I'm great. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. It's good to be on this end of it, actually, since I've been an observer so much. Now it's good to be a guest.
This is going to be fun because I get to ask you all kinds of questions and you have to answer them. So, usually council members don't have to answer anything that I do. Councilmember Rutherford is he's the chair this year of our personnel, this particular year of our personnel committee. But the personnel committee has lots of different components. We'll get into that in a little while, including veterans, which I know is a big interest to you. Your district is District 31. Yes. And you have served on the council for 2 years. That's some basic. I'm going to ask you in just a few minutes to kind of go over your life history as I normally do. But before I get into all that, the pictures, I can barely see the pictures behind your head, but it looks like there are 3 of them. And my question is, what are they, and why do you have them up there?
Well, I would point to the one in the middle first, and that is a print of the Davidson County Courthouse. And it was a gift from my 10-year-old son a couple of years ago for Father's Day. And so I incorporated it into those 3 pictures that you see. On one side of it is my certificate of election, and on the other side that you can only see really the bottom corner is a campaign poster from my race.
Okay. And you're talking about your race for office.
Yes.
But the reason I asked you that was that I also understand that you were in a race last week. It was the BNA 5K. Is that right?
That is right. Yes. I had the opportunity to run up and down the new runway there at BNA with a whole host of people from all over Nashville and beyond. There was one other council member was there, Russ Bradford, who represents that area of the airport, was participating as well. And Congressman Cooper was there too. And so it was a great event. And even though it was a rainy day, it worked out very well. And had a good time.
So what time did that race start?
It started at 8 o'clock.
8 o'clock. Okay, because I was wondering because it's been so hot lately that if you had it any later and the sun was out, you might melt on the runway.
That is true, but it had been raining, so it was still overcast, and so heat was not an issue, though, because it had been raining. It was a bit humid, but overall it wasn't that bad for the race itself. That worked out okay. The only issue they had was the parking, because they had us in the grass and that got a little muddy, but beyond that, it was
I got it. So and how'd you do in the race?
I think I did okay, but most of the time I was chasing my 10-year-old who decided he wanted to run, and I was fully supportive of that. So I wanted to at least keep him in sight. So I was running what off and on to keep him in view, and he ended up 13th in his age category. So that was pretty neat. So he'll decide he wants more of these.
That's really good, and you don't know what you finished in your age group, is that right?
I was paying more attention to his finish than mine. I'm sure I wasn't anywhere near the top like he was, but now that he's decided he wants to run, I'm going to have to step up my game.
Well, so I don't run very fast, and right now I don't run at all because I tore my meniscus. So I'm almost back to being allowed to get back and run. It may take me a while, but when I run pretty. There's Daniel. He's right behind your head.
Yes, he is here. Yes.
There he is. Daniel, how are you this morning?
Good.
Good. And how was the race last week? Did you run in the BNA 5K? You did? And you do okay? Did you do okay?
Yeah,
Tell me you're 13.
I was 13th.
And did you beat your father in the race? Did you come in before he did?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did that
That's
make
the
you feel
important
good?
thing. That's the
did that make
important
you
thing.
feel-
Yeah.
Did that make you feel good? Go ahead.
I would have been done better because I went back a couple of times.
Why did you go back a couple of times? To find your dad?
Let his dad catch up.
That's what I thought the answer was going to
Mostly
be.
my mom.
All right.
All right.
Well, Daniel, it's good to see you. I was going to tell you that I don't think I've ever been 13th in my category, except
Well,
when there were less than 13 people in the group. I think I might have done it then.
well, maybe we both need to step up our game.
Well, my key is to get back out there, and I'm going to do the best I can. So tell me this. Let's go ahead and start. Welcome everybody. I'm glad everybody's with us. So Councilmember Rutherford, tell me a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? What have you been doing? And lead up to the moment that you decided that you wanted to be on the Metro Council.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, I was raised in rural West Tennessee in Carroll County. But I've spent most of my adult life in Nashville, raised in West Tennessee. After graduating high school from Central High School there, I did 4 years on active duty in the Air Force. And then I came back home to finish college, where I graduated at UT Martin, Great West Tennessee School, excuse me, Great West Tennessee School. Went on from there to work some in state government, which ultimately led me to Nashville, where I ended up staying. And so in a roundabout way, I found my way back to the military because I currently work as a defense contractor, managing an employment program for the National Guard. That's a nationwide program that serves the National Guard population, working with their employment, civilian employment for the Guard and their family members. And so I've been in that field for over a decade now altogether. But along the way, I also worked in a variety of roles in campaigns and elections, mostly helping other people to get elected during election seasons. But I also did a stint at the Davis County Election Commission on staff there for a couple of years as well. So I've been in and around elections along with my career as well. So something I've always had an interest in, always been involved in. And then the last campaign before I ran that I worked on was when our former mayor, Carl Dean, ran for governor. I was a veterans advisor to that campaign, got to know a lot of people and a lot of his staff. And I sort of had it in the back of my mind that I might want to run for council. I had not ultimately decided yet, but then I talked to who was my current council member at the time, Fabian Bednay, and Fabian was term limited. And we talked about it a few times, and he was very encouraging. And then after the Dean campaign, I decided that I would do it. Just made the decision, and my first phone call I made was actually to Courtney Wheeler, who had managed Dean's campaign, and she gave me a lot of good insights and helped me get set up with a campaign apparatus, if you will. So I had a couple of people who were part of my campaign team. We started raising a little money. I got my name out there. Started attending a lot of events, and the next thing you know, it just all came together, and here I am.
Well, so a couple of questions for you. I always find it interesting how people get to the point where they decide that they want to run.
Yes.
I remember thinking when I was growing up, I always thought, I want to do that. I want to be in public office. And then there was a period of time where it's like, you know what, I would never do that. and then I think I came back around to the idea that maybe you make a difference by having the ability to vote. I'm still working on that one. But tell me what, obviously you were involved in campaigns. What was the thing that moved you from somebody who worked on campaigns to saying, you know what, I'm going to run myself?
Well, I always knew that I wanted to serve at some point in time when the opportunity presented itself, if you will. But it was not necessarily an overriding goal, but it was a goal. It was something I wanted to do. And as a kid, my parents were not active politically, but they were very tuned in to current events and what was going on. I mean, we would, as a family, would watch the evening news and would have discussions about what's going on in the world and that sort of thing. So I had an interest from a very young age in politics. And so I'm not sure of like when the switch actually flipped, if you will, on deciding to run. But the opportunity presented itself, and I decided to do it in terms of Metro Council. And I never worked previously on a council race, so that part was new to me because I had always done other races, had not participated in a local metro race. So that aspect was new. But I knew campaigns, I knew elections, and then I was in the sort of right place at the right time for the seat to open up where I live. So here, just decided to go for it.
Now, another question. So I found it really interesting that you used to watch the evening news with your parents.
Yes.
And so did I. It didn't do it all the time, but when my dad would come home from work, he would turn on, this is going to date me, we would watch CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite. And I remember watching it with him many, many times. Yes. So, which is odd. You don't hear that anymore. Now, that may have been a thing that I'm not sure how many families did it back when I was doing it or when you were doing it. But yes, that's interesting that they did it. So why did your parents think that was important? And then again, what news station were you watching? What national news?
Well, they were more into ABC. So I remember back to Frank Reynolds.
Okay.
ABC, if you remember Frank Reynolds.
I do.
And so so they were more towards ABC than CBS or NBC. So yeah, it just, again, they just had that interest. And I loved the conversation to talk about politics at that time, even as a kid, and try to figure these things out. I can remember as a little bitty kid, I was only 4 or 5 years old. I remember trying to figure out what the meaning was of Watergate, because I kept hearing this word and I knew it was a big deal, but I was trying to figure out what it was and what it meant. And I was only 4 or 5 years old. So even at that stage, I was trying to figure things out.
Well, I will tell you a story about that with me. I'm a big Cincinnati Reds fan, baseball fan, and became a big Reds fan when I was 7, 8, 9 years old. And I could never understand why the Reds were always on the front page of the Johnson City Press, which is where I grew up. And when I would read the story, it was like they're talking about Russians and communism, the Reds. It's like, I don't understand what this means. It's like they're supposed to be talking about the Reds, the Cincinnati Reds. Well, anyway, that's one of those things. So you, as I remember, I believe, council member, you ran unopposed. Is that right for your seat?
I did. Yes. I did run unopposed, and I'm not sure exactly what to chalk that up to. Maybe it has to do with the fact that we got out there early and put together that strong team that I like to refer to as my dream team. And I'm sure some luck was involved in that as well, but there were a couple of other folks that pulled petitions. So I fully anticipated a full race, but the filing deadline came and went, and I was the only one who had turned in a petition. So that's how that went.
It's the best way to run. I ran twice on it. It's the only way to do it.
Yeah.
So tell me, tell people who are listening, where's your district? And then what are the issues that that really kind of stem or are coming out of your district?
Well, District 31 is, it's mostly neighborhoods, and it's roughly the area just a hair north of Old Hickory Boulevard and south to the county line, from Nolensville Road over to Blue Hole Road, which is just short of I-24. So it's truly in the southeast quadrant of Davidson County.
Okay. And then in terms of the issues, obviously it's more neighborhood.
It is more neighborhoods, and it's also a lot of open space, a lot of farms, a lot of longtime family farms are in the area as well. And so we're very different than, you know, other districts, say, that might be closer into downtown because of that aspect. We may be similar to other areas on the outskirts, like you can draw some comparisons to the Bellevue area, for example. It has a lot of neighborhoods, a lot of open space. But that means that predominantly our biggest issue is development. That open space is, you know, target rich for developers. So I'm on a weekly basis, I have developers that reach out to me with various proposals and thoughts and ideas and questions related to the available space that's here. And so I would say that is issue number one. We also have a very strong international community in District 31. And so New Americans is an issue as well. Safety is an issue, I would say, too. We do have some concerns that have come up. We've had a couple of incidents in our district in the couple of years that I've been serving. So that's always top of mind too. We have a very active community in the sense that, especially when it comes around development, a couple of different local groups that advocate for preserving history, preserving the green space, environmental advocacy as well. All of those come together when it comes to, you know, determining zoning changes and new development and things like that. And they have an impact, because I've seen new developments that have changed their plans based on meetings with those groups. And so I try to facilitate that as much as I can, so that when we have new development, that it's something that fits our area, that it's something that that we can be proud of, and that it's something that doesn't just totally encroach upon the open space and what really, you know, makes this district what it is.
So there are, I know there are areas still in Nashville, if people can believe it, that have not been completely overdeveloped. And that's obviously it's a key subject in terms of things like affordable housing and just livability in Nashville. So you've got areas, southeast Nashville, you've got North Nashville, you've got the Bordeaux area. There are certain areas in Nashville where there is a lot of discussion. Some people might say it's concern about, you know, what may happen to those areas. It's kind of those last areas where developers haven't gotten a hold of it yet and haven't turned it into something that you know, is different from what it is. So tell people who are listening, from your perspective, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with an area that you've got developers calling, you know, they're coming your way because they're looking for land? How do you do it in the right way? What's the best way that you've come up with to try to protect it when you can, engage people, and figure out the right way to proceed?
Well, there's a couple of things there. One of which is sometimes I just say no. If it's something that I know the community is going to be against, because I have enough of a feel for the community that it's a waste of time for the developer and everybody else to even go down that road, I'll just say no to the developer. I'll give you an example of that. I won't name names, but there was a developer that wanted to put a car wash right in front of, literally in front of, a townhome community. It needed a zoning change to do that. I just said no, because that community would have been in an uproar, much less the neighbors around it, over the thought of a car wash right in front of their homes. So if it's something that is obvious like that, I'll save everybody's time, and I'll just say no to the developer. But if it's something that warrants a conversation, if it's something that, well, maybe the community would have an interest in it, maybe they would be supportive, or maybe they would have their own ideas to improve upon what the developer wants to do, then we should meet and we should talk about it and have that discussion. But one of the things that I learned right away on council, really my first meeting in relation to a development, was I learned to make sure that the people understand at a community meeting that I'm not representative of the developer. And it's very easy for the community to misunderstand that. So I always make it a point to make sure the community understands that I represent them, that I don't represent the developer, even though the developer and I may be standing there together because I'm introducing them, but I'm not representative of them. And so when the community gets that understanding and knows that I'm going to be on their side, then that's very helpful, because that changes the whole dynamic, and it changes it for the developer too, because then the developer understands that they need the community to be in agreement with what's going on, and that leaves the developer more open to make changes to their plans if it's something that's going to benefit the community. And a lot of times we have earned some changes to development that has been a positive for the community, like adding a walking trail or a dog park, something like that wasn't part of the initial plan, but was something that the community said, that's going to be a nicety. So we can be on board with this because it's going to add X, Y, or Z, where X, Y, or Z may not have been in the plan originally, but because we met, because we came together and had discussions, then it happened. And so then it's a win for everybody when that happens.
How did you, it's interesting because give you two scenarios for my first two development meetings when I was a district council member. The first one wasn't even in my district. I just went to it. It was in council member Ginger Hauser's district, and I just went because it was close to my district. And I remember sitting down and the discussions had started. I'd just come from another meeting, and a lady in the front row accused all of the council members of being on the take with the developers. And I remember saying, I don't even know who the developer is. I've been on the council less than 2 weeks, and already people are saying, bad things. The second thing was the first time I had a real discussion about a development. I invited the developers in, and they brought pictures of what they thought the development was look like. And I thought my district was going to kill me. They believed that I was part of the development team, and I'd already made up the decision. They already had the designs, and this is what I was going to do. And it was really hard. I learned a lot from that first meeting about the idea that people believe that council members represent the developers. So yes. How did you do it? How did you convince them that you didn't?
I make it my introduction at the beginning of every development meeting with the community. I make it part of my introduction that I represent them, the community, and not the developer. And I let it be known that I have no issue whatsoever with saying no to the developer, that it's really in the hands of the community as to whether or not this goes forward, that it's not truly in my hands, it's in their hands. And so I put that across at the beginning as part of the intro. And I find that to be helpful because I didn't do it at the first one. And I had a similar experience like you described, having to try to overcome that feeling from the community that I was with the developer, that I was supportive of the developer.
Besides that first meeting where you had to then go back and convince people you weren't working for the developer, good meetings, bad meetings. I mean, I remember going through it in my district. Some meetings were better than others, I guess, because of the nature of the project and the nature of the understanding of the people in there. Are you finding the same thing?
Yeah, I haven't had a bad meeting per se. I mean, we've had a couple of folks that were just adamantly against anything. That that happens. But in terms of the overall feeling of the meetings, everything has been pretty positive. Granted, over the last year and a half, so much of these community meetings have gone online and are remote meetings. So that changes the dynamic just a bit because you're not literally in front of people. And my fear in that is that also precludes certain people from taking part, people that may not be as adept at doing a Zoom meeting or something. So I've always been concerned about that in our Zooms when we do a remote community meeting. But it became necessary because government was still moving forward, and so you had to do that the best way you can. But to answer your question, I haven't had a bad meeting. Nothing's gotten out of hand or anything like that, even though there's been some opposing views, obviously.
Yeah, very good. That's good to hear. I was trying to think back. I had some that were better than others, but it always depended on the nature of the project usually, and how detailed or whatever. I began to think that when developers came and talked about projects, that sometimes it was easier just to, before they did anything much further, you got to the point where you could tell whether it was going to be an issue or not, and sometimes you just say no. I mean, it just made sense to say it's not worth your time.
Exactly.
So good for you. Well, so tell me, you've been on the council now. This is we're right at the midterm of the council. It's a 4-year term. You've been on there 2 years. So tell me what you think about. You feel like you made the right decision, and then I'll get into some detailed questions about what's it like to be on the council.
Well, there's been some moments where I thought, now I understand why no one else ran. but no, overall, no, it's been a really good experience. Certainly some trying times when we were dealing with the budget and dealing with pandemic and those sorts of things. I would say that this council, and I think you would agree that this council has probably faced more adversity than any previous council, just in everything that has occurred and so many different things that has occurred adversely that has impacted our city. But I think overall we've done pretty well to have come through it all as good as we have, and still working our way through pandemic, obviously. But no, it's been a good experience overall, and continues to be, and I look forward to the remainder of the term and what may be ahead.
So tell me, so I know based upon kind of how you deal with district issues, but for the purpose of people kind of generally, and not everyone, to my surprise, follows the council or understands how long our calendars are or what's on it. So tell folks who are listening from your perspective, what do you, in terms of getting ready for a council meeting, what do you do to get ready? And then talk a little bit about, when you get the agenda, what are you paying attention to?
Well, yeah, you have to balance it first off with the day job. So you've got to find the time to sit down and go through the agenda. And you may have 2 or 3 things on your mind, or I usually do, that I am anticipating that's going to come up. And then there'll be those things that that surprise you, that you're not expecting that'll come up. And so it's just a matter of sitting down and going through that agenda. And only the diehards out there would be doing that, other than council members, literally parsing through the agenda to see what stands out to you. So for me, it's a matter of balancing my time to be able to sit down and do that. And sometimes that's 2 or 3 days ahead. Sometimes it's literally the day of, if I have not found the time to be able to do it. But I think that's key. I think it's the most important thing that a council member can do ahead of a council meeting, is to literally go through the agenda so you know what's coming up. Because I don't like surprises. So occasionally something will become more of a hot item than I anticipated it to become. So you can't ever truly predict that. But it's best not to have too many surprises when the meeting actually happens. So that's how I try to approach it. And I can't speak for other council members and what their approach may be, but that's my approach.
So my approach is sort of similar. I mean, I'll go through the agenda, and sometimes, Sometimes it's 25 pages long, sometimes it's 40 pages long. And so I usually start by trying to figure out how many pages there are, because that'll give me some idea of how long I think we're probably going to be there. And then at some point, again, for people who don't necessarily watch the whole council, we have public hearings on the first meeting of the month, the first Tuesday of the month. That's public hearing on zoning matters. And with a city that's going through so much development, that may be 10, 15 pages long of public hearings.
Right.
And so I'm always aware of that. And then the next part is resolutions, and then bills on first reading, bills on second reading, bills on third reading. A lot of the bills are just, general stuff. A lot of them are typical zoning bills or things that we just have to do, or resolutions that require contract approval. Do you have the ability at this point and to look at a calendar and actually, I know you're looking for, you can't find the surprises in there, but how do you kind of pick out the ones are going to be difficult?
Well, a lot of times you'll have some insights from just following the discussions prior to, like on social media, because a lot of things will get social media attention before it gets any other attention. So I'm tracking social media as an indicator. It's not the only indicator, but it is sometimes an indicator as to what's going to pop up and be more of an issue than some other items. But I'll also point out to you too, you look at page count, and I do it as well, but I've learned that page count is not always an indicator of how long the meeting will be.
That is correct, particularly
Yeah.
if there's a lot of bills that are just kind of general.
Yeah.
What is in terms of your working relationships with other council members, with the mayor's office? I know there are limitations on a lot of discussions that can be held off site, but how do you feel about that? I mean, in terms of just good working relationships with other people at this point, and your relationship, I mean, how do you engage with the mayor's office to kind of find out what they may be interested in?
Well, I have sort of semi-regular conversations with a couple of different staffers in the mayor's office. And he's, of course, has just now hired Ginger Hauser, and Ginger and I have known one another for years. So I have that relationship, and also Mike Jameson is a key go-to as well, as he is for probably most council members. So engaging with his staff is one of the primary things in terms of getting a feel for what's going on with the mayor's office. And of course, he meets with council members as well, like ahead of the budget. He gives everybody the opportunity to come in and have a discussion with him directly. And so that I'm always appreciative of that. One of the things that came up, I'll point out too, that's key in my district in relation to that last meeting with the mayor, is the need for a fire station in District 31, because we've got about half of our district that pays more in insurance premiums based on response time. And so we're greatly in need of a new fire station. The land was appropriated during the prior term under Fabian Bedney. So it's a matter now of when we bring the station online. I wanted to do it in the beginning of this term, but of course, we had just so many things that happened, and it was just not realistic to do. But that was something I discussed with the mayor in depth in this last meeting leading into this budget, because he was wanting to put some additional money into the fire department for new personnel and for upgrades to stations, and I believe the new one in Bellevue. But I wanted to make sure that if we're not prioritized this year, that we're prioritized next year. And so he was open to that, and I took that as an assurance that in adding additional funding next time around to the fire department would mean a new station for District 31. And it has greater impact than just 31. It really has an impact throughout Southeast Nashville. And so that's a big concern for 31, as well as the other issues that I mentioned previously. But when you mention engagement with the mayor's office, that's probably been the biggest engagement that I've had with them, is in relation to the new fire station that's needed here.
Okay.
But in terms of council members,
Yeah,
I have a good relationship with my colleagues. I think something that's missing is related to the pandemic, just simply because we had such a long period of time that we met remotely, and we didn't get to have the conversations with one another at the courthouse that we would have had we been meeting in person, that you just can't do through a remote call. So we're still getting to know one another in that sense. We're behind in terms of just that fellowship, if you will, with one another.
And I think that's been pretty clear and pretty obvious. As a veteran member of the council, that's always a very important thing, is that council members get to know each other. And one of the things I've told many people is that that first year is very important for a body like ours, because it's so large, to get to meet and kind of get to know as many different people as possible, because it's such a wide, diverse group of people. And because of the pandemic, a lot of that chance to do that got taken away, which makes it you're really dealing with people that you don't know as well. Some people may be surprised that some of my best friends on the council when I was a district member were some of the more conservative members of the council, and I was seen as one of the more progressive members. You know, you can argue on the floor, but you can still be friends off the floor. And
right.
Particularly if you get to know people, they're people, they live in the city, people, and they have families just like everybody else. So a lot of that was pandemic took a lot of that stuff away.
It did. But I wanted to also say that I think the veterans issue actually helps to pull a lot of council members together that wouldn't necessarily be on the same page about a lot of other things. Because when you talk about doing, you know, what more can we do to support our veteran community, you know, who's against that? So issues like that, I think, are important for us as a body to have some focus on, because it pulls together folks that aren't normally aligned.
All right, so that's where I was headed. So I guess first, let me ask you about, so you've been chair of the personnel committee. I think I was looking for my sheet. It's got a longer name. I always just call it the personnel committee. But you actually, you changed the name of it, and veterans has been added. So tell people about that.
Yes, veterans has been added. I wanted to do that when I became chair, and it's I see it as more than symbolism. I think it's important because of the fact that our Metro Veteran Service Office falls under the HR department. And so it seemed a natural fit, if you will, to include it in the title of the Personnel Committee, to add veterans to the title to recognize that. And knowing that we were going to push forward on doing more for our veterans and expanding that office and what they do, it made sense to do that, to sort of call attention to where this stuff goes. And anything veteran related would go to the personnel committee, and now it is in the title. And granted, we are working on some overhaul to the whole committee system, so I don't know how that will play out in the end. But I thought it was important to do so when we did. And you know, we were able to expand the Veteran Service Office because there were two staffers there, and now there's a third. And so I thought that was important to acknowledge that in the name of the committee. And of course, we want to go beyond that as well. We want to do more. And of course, we've established the Special Committee on Veterans, which is still doing its work and finalizing its report, which will be turned into to you and the council before too long, within the next month or so.
So without giving up any secret information coming out of the report, tell people what you can about what you found so far, the purpose of the report, and maybe some stuff that you're finding.
Well, the purpose of the Special Committee on Veterans, and thank you for your part in helping us put that together and supporting it. But the purpose is to determine what can Metro do better to improve its services to our local veteran community. Where are the gaps, if you will, and what can we do to fill in those gaps? we took a look at not only what Metro does through the Veteran Service Office, that is Metro government, but also the nonprofit community that is serving veterans locally, along with other governmental entities like the State Veteran Service Office and the VA on the federal level. What's missing in terms of being able to provide service, and that was the focus of the group. And a report is coming together that will answer that. And so I don't want to give away too many of the secrets right now, but we are looking at what we can do better to improve the Veteran Service Office. What can we do better to coordinate between Metro government and those other entities that I mentioned, to ultimately improve upon the services that we provide to the veteran community. And a lot of people, when they think about local government and veterans, they get a little confused because they think, well, isn't all the benefits that come to veterans from the federal government? And that is true, but so many times there's a void between the veteran and the actual benefits. And so that's what not only the nonprofit groups, but local government can do to help connect the veteran to the benefits that are available to them. And Nashville has a strong veteran community, very thriving veteran community, and is larger than many other cities in terms of our veteran population. So there's nearly 50,000 veterans in Davidson County, and not all of them are what you would consider at risk. We're focused on the at risk, and about 25%, a little less than a quarter of our homeless population are veterans. And a lot of people don't think about that necessarily when they see the homeless or engaging with the homeless, but many of them have served our country. And so there's so much more that we can do for them if we can solve the overall veteran homelessness issue, we put a significant dent in the total veteran population. So it's important stuff, and it's something that we need to do more to support our veteran community locally, and we need to do more to be enticing for veterans to come to Nashville, because again, not every veteran is at risk, but we're a big military town in the sense that our National Guard headquarters is here in Nashville, obviously, as we're the state capital, so we have a large Guard population. We have many Guard and Reserve units in our area. We're close to Fort Campbell, which is actually the second largest Army post in terms of folks transitioning out of the military. And so many of them settle in Nashville. They don't all go home to wherever they came from. Many like this area and decide to stay. Many transition out of the military and go to our colleges and universities. So we have a very strong veteran population. And so whatever we can do to serve them better, that makes us overall a more welcoming city. And that's going to focus. What can we do to fill in the gaps? Yeah.
Well, and I guess we got a question that came through, and it was the council and its role with social services. And I guess the question would be, how do we, in again, your 2 years, you as a new member of the council, you have done quite a bit of focusing, particularly on veterans, but that includes a lot of stuff, a lot of issues regarding the provision of social services. What do you think? How do you think we do, and how do we do better?
Well, my focus, obviously, when it comes to social services, has been on veterans, but overall, it's how do we spend our money, and do we spend enough money on social services? Those are the questions that need to be answered. And I'm not saying I know the answers, but I think those are the key questions. And so we want to be obviously a welcoming city, but we want to do what we can to take care of those that need that extra help. And so that's where many of our veterans find themselves in that situation of needing that extra help to be able to fully integrate into civilian community. And so I think overall Metro can learn a lot from what is being done in veteran services to expand that to other areas of service and folks who are in need.
Okay, so you've also talked about, so my first question was obviously in terms of Metro and how
Yes.
Metro government works. We do provide assistance and services to not-for-profits. We provide resources to some extent. What do you think about that? You know, obviously there are lots and lots of not-for-profits out there. You know, Operation Stand Down, those different things. How do you think that works within the Metro system? Do we do it right? Is there a better way you think we can do it? How do we make sure that what resources we do provide out there get to the people who actually need the help?
Well, that's a big question, and I'm not sure I have an answer to it, because there are so many different nonprofits out there doing great work. The question would be, how do we decide who gets what in terms of Metro's support? You mentioned Operation Stand Down. They're probably the main go-to in terms of veteran nonprofit in our area. They're not the only one. The Room at the End does some great work with veterans as well. And so there's a number of them. But how do you decide who gets support from Metro, and then who gets how much? And that's an important question. And is it the same thing every time? So if you're going to give a certain amount of support to one entity one year, does that mean that entity gets the same amount next year? I think you have to weigh what they're doing and what the benefit is of what they received last year. And then to make a determination as to what you do going forward. That's a tough call. And then is it council's decision? Is it the mayor's decision? Who ultimately should have the authority in that? All those are tough questions that we need to come together, I guess, as a council and decide how we handle that and how we approach that. I would say probably there needs some improvement over what we've been doing in the past. I think it's important for Metro, for government in general, to support these entities, but how far does that go? That's the question that we ultimately need to answer, and that may be different from council to council as well, because the lay of the land in terms of the makeup of council may change in terms of the opinion of what Metro should be doing for these different entities.
All right, so
it's about serving people, so we want to do what's best ultimately when people are being served. Yes.
So let me ask you another question, and I'll give you my response first, so that you can either say you disagree or not. So I know everybody's busy. We have a part-time council that sometimes feels like it's full-time council. People have other jobs, and so everybody's running around quite a bit. But on this particular issue, I've always found that a lot of times, not everybody is around the table that should be. Okay, and what I mean by that is when we're trying to figure out something to do, particularly now we're talking about resources and social services and getting money to the right places. Sometimes not everybody, and it's hard to get everybody to the table, but sometimes you don't have the key players around when the decisions are made. That's my take on it. And I'm finding more and more that if you can get people to the table, you can get a better sense of what actually is needed out there. So in terms of you're dealing with veterans issues, what do you think? You think everybody's around the table that needs to be, or sometimes, or can we do a better job of making sure that everybody is at the table?
I think we can definitely do a better job of that, because I don't think we have everybody at the table that needs to be at the table. And I can point to our special committee on veterans that came together because we pulled together so many different entities. And as I started thinking about who should be on that committee, I ended up discovering some folks I wouldn't have necessarily thought about. Because somebody mentioned to me, like, for example, the Nashville Bar Association. And I'm like, well, why would the Bar Association want anything to do with the Veteran Special Committee? And then I discovered that they have a committee on veterans that helps connect veterans who are in need with legal services. And I'm like, well, that's great. And so they were part of, or are a part of, our special committee. And so that's an example of an entity that wouldn't necessarily have been thought about, that should be at that table. that a lot of folks wouldn't have necessarily thought about. And so how many others out there when it comes to social services and making decisions on these things, not just veterans, but all of social services, how many are not at the table because just nobody thought about inviting them to the table? And so that's the key. How do we know? How do we figure out who needs to be at the table? And we know, we've got to know that right now, not everybody's at the table it needs to be.
Yeah. It's hard to do it. And then you all you can do is kind of force to try to get everybody to the table the best you can. All right. So a couple other things. We have a few minutes left. I got a question about redistricting, and I don't know how much you know about it, but it's coming just like the state legislature and the questions going on with congressional redrawing. That's also happening here with
Yes.
the council lines. So tell people what you know about that so far.
Well, I know a little bit, maybe just enough to be dangerous. I don't know, but what I do know is District 31 is too large because of growth that has happened. New people moving in, people transitioning from other parts of town, whatever the case may be. Southeast in general has grown quite significantly, and 31 is too large. I met with the Planning Commission. They met with, I believe they met with all first term members one-on-one. I don't know if they got to everybody yet or not, but that's what they were doing to just have an initial conversation about it. And I was guessing, just using the numbers that I knew, that I'd probably have to cut about 4,000 people from my district to be within the size that we needed to be. Or no, I thought 5,000. They told me it was about 4,000. So I was pretty close in what I was speculating. So they asked about like what would be the natural areas, if you will, natural boundaries that I would see to potentially turn 31 into what would be this new district based on population. And so we had those discussions. But one of the things that could potentially change that is they were weighing at the time, I don't know if a decision has been made, about whether or not the Southeast in general would, based on population, need a new district. A new district, meaning another part of town would lose a district so that we still had 35 districts. So that's all being weighed. Where they're at on that, I don't know. And so there could be some, there's going to be some changes, but they could be significant based on ultimately the decisions of the Planning Commission. But I will say that I'm glad that the Planning Commission is redrawing our lines and not the state legislature.
So tell me, have they given you some sense of timeline? I've heard different things, and I know they're working on it, but some sense of timelines when they think they may have this.
Yeah, I don't really have a firm timeline on when this is going to happen and when they're going to get their work finalized. But I do know, and you may know as well, that numbers from the census were late, pandemic related. So everything is behind what it would have normally been. Yeah. So
well,
it is happening.
I would say this happens every 10 years. And it happened to me when I was a district council member. And I remember when I had the 25th district, when I first ran, I was in the middle of my district. When they redrew the lines, I think they tried to draw me out of my district. I didn't take it personally, but because of the demographics, and obviously you're seeing it in your district, a lot of people moving into that area.
Right.
We had, I ended up the second time around right on the edge of my district. It had all moved to the southeast, and it's interesting how this stuff works. But we'll see how that all plays out. My last question, I guess, for you is, and this is something that you were helpful to me with last year, and you're going to do it again this year. It's the 9/11 program. Obviously, this will be the 20th year since the tragic events of 9/11, and we had started the year after in 2002, the council getting together on September 11th just for a little while to show and well, first of all, to remember, but also to show that sometimes there are more important things. You know, we can fight over things all the time, but sometimes it's more important to kind of stand together and say we understand what is important. Tell me a little bit about what's happening with the 9/11 program, at least in terms of your understanding at this point.
Yeah, we've had a lot of conversation about it. I say we, I mean, the Metro Council Veterans Caucus has met and discussed it. I work closely with Councilmember Hancock, who co-chairs the Veterans Caucus with me, which, by the way, this is the first time the council has ever had a Veterans Caucus. So we are the inaugural Veterans Caucus of Metro Council, something I'm proud of. But we're putting together what will be a relatively small ceremony, which it always has been meant to be a small ceremony. And there will be a chance for council members and anyone else that wants to join us to gather at the courthouse early that morning. And there'll be a special reading and a prayer. And it's still coming together. So there may be one or two other little items, but it'll be relatively short. And then we want to encourage everyone that attends to then afterwards attend the one with the Nashville Fire Department. So I think it would be really a nice thing to go to both, because of course the fire department was so instrumental in what took place in the aftermath and what took place in 9/11. We recognize the work that firefighters do. So obviously it's important for the fire department to have their service. And so we think ours is a nice lead up to theirs. And so it's just a moment of remembrance, and especially because of the 20th anniversary that brings it all back even more so, just given that date on the calendar that it's 20 years.
Do you remember where you were when you found out about the attacks on the buildings and the plane crashes?
I do. As a matter of fact, I was at my mother's in Carroll County. She was living then. She passed in 2004. And so I just remember being there with her as we watched everything that was taking place on the news.
I think it's important to obviously always remember, I thank the Veterans Caucus for kind of picking up this responsibility and putting together a program. I think it's important, and I know that our program with the council is going to tie in with the fire department, but it's a very important day to think back and remember. And it's amazing that it's been 20 years.
It is. It's hard to believe, but I hope that our recognition of this as just this small little service will continue year after year. I think it's important.
Well, Councilmember Rutherford, we are out of time. I really appreciate you being on, and I know that you've been watching these things, and we wanted to have you on because you have really, I think, a very good sense of what's happening both in your district and in the city. I really appreciate kind of your role in terms of picking up things with the veterans and the Veterans Caucus and all the other things that have gone with that. And I think you have a really keen sense on what's happening with social services issues. So thank you. Thank you for being on.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. And I'd like to also encourage my colleagues to join in here more often. This is kind of like Council 101, watching these shows that you put on. So I want to thank you for doing this.
Well, I appreciate it. I learn a tremendous amount every time I do one of these things. It's like I'm just taking notes going, this is so interesting. Linda McFadden Ketchum with Moms Demand Action is on not next week. We will take a break for Labor Day weekend, but on September 11th, she will be my guest on that Saturday. So anyway, everybody, I know we usually do talk about pandemic numbers and the Delta virus. The numbers are still very dangerous. Everybody be safe, take precautions. People know what to do. Get vaccinated if you haven't, wear a mask if you're around people. Just be careful. We want everybody to stay safe. Have a good rest of the weekend, everybody. Enjoy the weekend off next week. and we will see you back here in 2 weeks. Councilmember Rutherford, have a great weekend, and tell Daniel I said hello. Okay,
I
even though
will. Thank you.
I told him at the beginning, but tell Daniel I have a good weekend. I'll see him out running. Okay.
Okay. All right.
Okay. I'll talk to you. I'll see everybody soon. All right. Bye.